And it was home to the Seminole Indians. I believe Thomas mentioned it earlier on today. It's where the last battles took place. It's right here in the bushes over here. And the soldiers, they were tired. They were hungry. They were physically beaten. And they said, there's not enough Indians there to bother anybody. Why don't we just get out of here and leave these people alone? We just get out of the Everglades. And there were 200 Indians living over here. Traditionally, Indian stories, I never really heard a lot about the skunk ape or the Bigfoot. They had the little people that lived in the forest here, and they were supposedly a small, like hobbits or something like that. And then one of the older legends was of an animal called Big Ears that lived in the swamp over here. Big Ears was a story that kind of evolved from the last of the wars. Apparently there was a young baby in the village that was crying, and they saw the soldiers coming up the river, and they just could not get the baby to be quiet. And so they put something over the baby's mouth to keep it quiet, and the baby suffocated and died. And the Indians, they don't forget these things. These are some of the stories that are passed down. But they created a story about a monster called Big Ears that could hear anything. If it heard a baby or a little kid, it would go up and it would wrap its ears around it, and it would be dissolved and disappear. And this was something that they created to tell the kids to keep them quiet. They didn't want to, there's a war going on, you're going to get us killed. They understood a monster going to eat them. They understood that well. And so Big Ears was a monster that roamed the swamp here 200 years ago through legends. The skunk ape goes a little bit deeper than that. You know, the tribe's been very supportive of me, and I've always kind of been worried about that, but they're coming forward and they're telling their stories, and many Indians have been in here and told me stories of skunk apes here in the past in the Everglades. So it really lightened my heart and made my soul feel good to see Betty up here today, because it was like, you know, a wall coming down. They're very secretive people. These Indian villages you see along the road, if you go to one and somebody comes out to talk to you and say, how many people live back there? They're not going to tell you. They've been counted enough. They're just real quiet that way. So Betty's mother told me she was in the forest after I started talking to her about the skunk ape, and she was cutting palmetto fronds for the cheeky huts that they build. And she was over towards Naples in a palmetto hammock, and as she was cutting the fronds, they would drop to the ground, and she'd cut and it'd drop. And she said she cut one, and when it fell, right there in front of her was like the Bigfoot, the skunk ape, and she said she saw it, and so that was one of the stories that I've been told by the Indians. Another story was this, that when the Indians were, the Seminole Indians, and the wars were heavy, and they got down here into the Everglades, that they were hungry, and that they didn't have clothes, they didn't have much of anything. They were just broken, but they were fighting. They were strong, but they didn't have much. And that one of the scout Indians came back from out in the grasslands of the Everglades. He went out scouting to see what was going on. And he came back to the village and he told them, he says, I don't know what it is, but it's these huge men covered with hair in the hammock out there. And I saw them and they didn't see me, but they're huge. And the tribe talked to him. They said, well, we need help. We're in a dangerous situation here. We're going to use all the help we can get. And maybe we could communicate with them and they could help us fight. And so this Indian scout went back there and he found him, but he was unable to communicate. There was no verbal communications. He said, when he got back to the village, he said, I tried everything, but I couldn't communicate. I couldn't communicate with him. And so that was interesting. And then many stories from the Seminole Reservation of the Indians seeing skunk apes. I guess I've been kind of blessed in my life. I've had 3 sightings, but I do live here. First sighting when I was 10 years old. My second sighting was in 1997, and I don't know if any of y'all saw that episode on Unsolved Mysteries, but those were some really fascinating photographs. I took 27 photographs that day. I spent 6 months in a ladder stand, a tripod stand. I would come in occasionally, but for the best part, I was out there for a full 6 months. One evening, it was getting dark. There was a lot of water on the ground. I heard something splashing in the distance. And when I looked out, I saw something making its way through the marsh and between some hammocks. And I started to make it out. At first, I thought maybe it's a hunter or something like that, because I knew it wasn't a 4-legged animal because it was sloshing, 2 legs sloshing. And finally, as it revealed itself, it was just man-sized animal covered with hair coming across the marsh, once again where I saw it when I was young. And that's why I was in that area. Particularly why I was there that 6 months is when all of the, you may remember, there were hundreds of sightings nearby here on the Turner River Road. There were tour buses full of people who were seeing the skunk ape just a couple miles up the Turner River Road. And and Unsolved Mysteries, when they did, my photos went out, Unsolved Mysteries came down, and they documented my photographs, but also the sightings on the Turner River Road. So if you get a chance to see that episode of Unsolved Mysteries, it's one of the best efforts ever made at any real kind of evidence collecting. It's a very good show. It's quite popular too.